Okay, here we go, section 1.2. Now we're going to solve equations of three different forms. Ax plus b is equal to c, ax plus b is equal to cx plus d, and then again equations which contain parentheses. In the previous PowerPoint we solved two different types of equations. We solved equations of the form x plus a is equal to b, so we're talking about something like x plus 4 is equal to 11. And what we realized then was to get rid of a term, we had to use the opposite of the term on both sides of the equation. So to isolate the variable x, we had to remove the positive 4, and we did so by putting a negative 4 on both sides of the equation. That canceled the 4's on the left and left us with x equals positive 7. The other type of equation that we solved was ax is equal to b, something along the lines of 3x is equal to negative 21. In this type of equation, our goal was to get the variable x by itself, but we were removing the coefficient. And to remove the coefficient, we decided that if the coefficient were either an integer or a decimal, we would divide both sides of the equation by that coefficient. 3x means 3 times x, and so to undo that multiplication, we'll use division. We'll divide both sides by 3, and we get x equals negative 7. Both of those equations required a single step to solve. Now we're moving into equations which will contain multiple steps to solve, and it's impossible to memorize the different types of steps. It's far easier, though, if we can come up with a procedure, and that procedure will help us solve any equation from here on forward. So let's look at that procedure. Step 1 is to simplify both sides of the equation. By that we mean if there are parentheses, get rid of those parentheses by using the distributive property, and if there are like terms on the same side of the equation, we need to go ahead and combine those like terms. Remember, there are two types of like terms. There are variable terms which can be considered alike if they have the same variable raised to the same exponent, and constant terms or numbers are like terms. So step 1, remove parentheses, combine like terms. Step 2, use the addition or subtraction property of equality to get the variables on one side of the equation. Step 3, use the addition or subtraction property of equality to get the numbers on the opposite side of the equation. Step 4, use the multiplication or division property of equality to remove the coefficient from in front of the variable. And step 5 is to check. Alright, let's look at our first equation. Negative 8x plus 3 is equal to negative 29. Though we may not need all four steps, it's best if you think about all four steps so that when you get to an equation which requires all four steps, you're thinking the same way. Step 1, get rid of grouping symbols, combine like terms. There are no grouping symbols in this equation. The left-hand side of the equation contains no like terms. Step 2, let's get the variable on one side, and step 3, the number on the other. Since there is a single variable, negative 8x, let's leave it on the left-hand side and get the negative 8x by itself by removing that positive 3. And to get rid of that positive 3, we're going to put a negative 3 on both sides. That cancels the 3's and leaves negative 8x equals negative 32. Okay, we have the variable on one side of the equation and the number on the other, which completes step 2 and 3. Step 4 then is to remove the coefficient. So we'll divide both sides by negative 8. X equals positive 4. The fifth step, remember, is a check. From my experience, I find very few people check. They normally submit the homework or the quiz and let WebAssign do the checking for them. And that's fine as long as you're confident with your equation solving skills. Let's look at equation B. 7b plus 5 is equal to 61. Step 1, get rid of grouping symbols, combine like terms. There are no grouping symbols. The left-hand side of the equation does not contain any like terms. Step 2, get the variable on one side. Step 3, the number on the other. Since there is a single variable, 7b, we'll leave the variable on the left-hand side and move all the numbers to the opposite side, the right-hand side. To accomplish this, we need to get rid of that positive 5, and so we'll put a negative 5 on both sides of the equation. The 5's cancel, leaving 7b is equal to 56. With the variable on one side and the number on the other, steps 2 and 3 are complete. Step 4 is to remove the coefficient. To do that, we'll divide both sides by positive 7, and we end up with b is equal to 8. Let's tackle equation C. 8b minus 3 is equal to negative 9. Step 1, get rid of grouping symbols, combine like terms. There are no grouping symbols in this equation. The left-hand side of the equation does not contain like terms. Let's move on to step 2 and 3. Step 2 is get the variable on one side. Step 3, the number on the other. As in the previous examples, there is a single variable in this equation, so we'll leave it on the side in which it is. We'll leave the 8b on the left-hand side. To get 8b by itself and move the numbers to the opposite side, we need to get rid of that negative 3, and we'll do so by adding 3 or putting a positive 3 on both sides. That cancels the 3's and leaves us 8b equals negative 6. Step 2 and 3 are complete. We have the variable on one side, the number on the other. The fourth and final step is to remove the coefficient. To do that, we'll divide both sides by 8. That gives me 1b, or b is equal to negative 3/4. Example D. 9 equals negative 12c plus 5. Once again, step 1, get rid of grouping symbols and combine like terms. There are no grouping symbols. The right-hand side does not contain any like terms. Let's move on to steps 2 and 3. Variable on one side, number on the other. The only variable in this case is on the right-hand side, so we'll leave it there, and we'll move the numbers to the opposite side. To accomplish that, we need to remove the positive 5, and so we'll put a negative 5 on both sides of the equation. On the left-hand side of the equation, positive 9 and negative 5 gives us a positive 4. On the right-hand side, the 5's cancel, leaving negative 12c. Steps 2 and 3 are complete. We have the variable on one side, number on the other. The fourth step is to remove the coefficient, so we'll divide both sides by negative 12. On the right, negative 12 divided by negative 12 is positive 1, and 1c is the same as c. On the left-hand side, 4/12 can be reduced to negative 1/3. Alright, so now we're tackling a new type of equation, but our 4-step process, with the 5th step being the check, will still work here. Step 1, get rid of grouping symbols, combine like terms. Neither side of the equation contains a grouping symbol, nor does either side have like terms. Step 2, let's get the variables on one side, the numbers on the other. Normally when I have variables on both sides and numbers on both sides, I prefer to have my variables appear on the left and my numbers on the right. But it really doesn't matter what side you put the variable or number on as long as you get them on opposite sides. I'm going to begin with the positive 2a. To remove that positive 2a and move all the variables to the left-hand side, we would have to put a negative 2a on both sides. Combining the a's, positive 7 and negative 2 is positive 5. So we have 5a minus 5 equals, on the right-hand side the 2a's cancel, and we're left with negative 20. Since we moved the variables to the left-hand side of the equation, we need to get all the numbers on the opposite side, on the right-hand side. And to accomplish that, we need to get rid of that negative 5. So we'll put a positive 5 on both sides of the equation. The 5's cancel, leaving 5a equals, on the right-hand side, negative 20 and positive 5 is negative 15. Step 2 and 3 are complete. We now have the variable on one side and the number on the other. The fourth step is to remove the coefficient. To accomplish that, we'll divide both sides by 5, and that leaves us a equals negative 3. Equation B works very much the same way. Step 1, once again, get rid of grouping symbols and combine like terms. Neither side of the equation contains a grouping symbol, nor does either side contain like terms. Let's move on to steps 2 and 3. Variable on one side, number on the other. Once again, I prefer to have my variables on the left, which means I'm going to remove the negative 3y from the right-hand side of the equation. To accomplish that, we'll put a positive 3y on both sides. Combining the variable terms, positive 4y and positive 3y is positive 7y. Here's the minus 2 equals. On the right-hand side, the 3y's cancel, and we're left with negative 16. We've moved the variables to the left-hand side of the equation. Now we need to move the numbers to the right-hand side. Therefore, we need to get rid of that negative 2. So I'll add 2 or put a positive 2 on both sides of the equation. Combining the numbers or constant terms, the 2's cancel, leaving 7y equals. On the right-hand side, negative 16 and a positive 2 is negative 14. Steps 2 and 3 are complete. We have the variable on one side, the number on the other. The fourth step is to remove the coefficient. All right, let's divide both sides by 7 to accomplish that. On the left-hand side, 7 divided by 7 is 1, so we get 1y or y. On the right-hand side, negative 14 divided by positive 7 is negative 2. All right, let's tackle equation C. Once again, we'll start with step 1. Remove grouping symbols and combine like terms. Again, neither side of the equation has grouping symbols or like terms. So we'll move on to steps 2 and 3. Let's get the variable on one side, number on the other. I prefer once again to have my variables on the left, so I'm going to remove that positive 2y on the right-hand side of the equation. And to do that, we'll put a negative 2y on both sides. Combining the variable terms, positive 6y and negative 2y gives us positive 4y. Minus 1 equals. On the right-hand side, the 2y's cancel. We're left with a positive 2. Since we moved the variables to the left-hand side of the equation, we need all the numbers on the opposite side, the right-hand side. To accomplish that, we need to get rid of that negative 1 on the left, and so we'll put a positive 1 on both sides of the equation. Combining the constant terms or numbers, the 1's cancel, leaving 4y equals. On the right-hand side, positive 2 and positive 1 is positive 3. With the variable on one side and the number on the other, steps 2 and 3 are complete. We'll move on to step 4, which is to remove the coefficient. To do that, we'll divide both sides by 4, and that gives us y equals 3/4. Moving to equation D. Step 1, remove grouping symbols, combine like terms. Equation D has no grouping symbols, nor are there any like terms on the same side of the equation. So let's move on to steps 2 and 3. Variable on one side, number on the other. To get the variables on the left-hand side, we need to remove the positive 4a from the right-hand side, and to do so, we'll put a negative 4a on both sides. Combining the variable terms, positive 8 and negative 4 is positive 4. So we get 4a minus 2 equals. On the right-hand side, the 4a's cancel and leave a negative 5. Since in step 2 we moved all the variables to the left, in step 3 we have to move all the numbers to the right. To accomplish that, we need to get rid of that negative 2, so we'll put a positive 2 on both sides of the equation. Combining the numbers, negative 2 and positive 2 cancel one another out, so we're left with 4a equals. On the right-hand side, negative 5 and positive 2 is negative 3. With the variable on one side and the number on the other, we've accomplished steps 2 and 3. The fourth step is to remove the coefficient, and to do that, we'll divide both sides by 4, and that gives us a equals negative 3/4. All right, here in example E, we have a two-step process. The first step is to solve the equation The second step, once we know the value of x, is to evaluate the variable expression 3x minus 2. So let's start first by solving the equation 7x plus 3 is equal to 5x minus 7. Step 1 in solving equations is to remove grouping symbols and combine like terms. Equation E does not contain any grouping symbols, nor do we have any like terms on the same side of the equation. So we'll move to steps 2 and 3. Step 2, get the variable on one side. Step 3, the numbers on the other. To get all the variables on the left-hand side, we need to remove that positive 5x from the right-hand side, and to do so, we'll subtract 5x or put a negative 5x on both sides. Combining the x's, positive 7 and negative 5 is positive 2, so we get 2x plus 3 equals. On the right-hand side, the 5x's cancel, and we're left with a negative 7. Since we moved variables to the left, we need to move all the numbers to the right. To accomplish that, we need to get rid of that positive 3, so we'll put a negative 3 on both sides of the equation. Combining the numbers, the 3's cancel, leaving us 2x equals, on the right-hand side, negative 7 and negative 3 is negative 10. At this point, steps 2 and 3 are complete. We have the variable on one side and the number on the other. The fourth step is to remove the coefficient. So we'll divide both sides by 2, and that gives us x equals negative 5. Now that we know the value of x, specifically negative 5, we can evaluate the variable expression 3x minus 2. And to evaluate a variable expression, we simply plug in the value negative 5 for x. That gives us 3 times negative 5 minus 2. To simplify, we have to follow order of operations, which tells us that we have to multiply before we can add or subtract. Multiplying positive 3 and negative 5, we get negative 15 minus 2, and negative 15 minus 2, or negative 15 and negative 2, is a negative 17. Equation F is going to work fairly much the same way. We need to solve the equation first and then evaluate the variable expression 4x plus 2. So let's solve the equation. Step 1, get rid of grouping symbols, combine like terms. There are no grouping symbols, nor are there any like terms. We'll move on to steps 2 and 3. Get the variable on one side, step 2, the numbers on the other, step 3. In this case, since there's only a single number, negative 8, we'll leave that where it's at, and we'll move all the variables to the other side of the equation. And to accomplish that, we need to get rid of that positive 3x, so we'll put a negative 3x on both sides. Combining the x's, positive 5 and negative 3 is positive 2, so we get 2x equals. On the right-hand side, the 3x's cancel, and we're left with negative 8. With the variable on one side and the number on the other, we'll proceed to the fourth step, which is to remove the coefficient. We'll divide both sides by 2 then. Dividing both sides by 2, we end up with x equals negative 4. Alright, now that we know that x has a value of negative 4, we can plug that negative 4 in for the variable x in the variable expression 4x plus 2. That gives us 4 times negative 4 plus 2. As with the previous example, to simplify, we must follow order of operations, which tells us that we have to multiply before we can add or subtract. Positive 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. That leaves us negative 16 plus 2, or if you will, a negative 16 and a positive 2, which is a negative 14. Up until now, we haven't seen an equation which contains a grouping symbol. Let's see if we can go ahead and begin working with equations which contain grouping symbols or parentheses. So for the very first time, we have to begin with step 1, which is to remove grouping symbols and combine like terms. To remove grouping symbols, we must distribute. In this case, we're going to distribute the negative 2 into the parentheses. The positive 12x then doesn't change. Distributing negative 2 times positive 4x is negative 8x. Negative 2 times negative 6 is positive 12. So we've removed the grouping symbols, but the other part of step 1 is to combine like terms if we have any like terms on the same side of the equation. In this case we do. We have variable terms which can be combined. Combining positive 12x and negative 8x, we get a positive 4x, so we have 4x plus 12 is equal to 28. Right, so we just completed step 1. We got rid of the grouping symbols and we combined like terms. So let's move on to steps 2 and 3. Variable on one side, number on the other. Since the only variable term is on the left-hand side, let's leave it there, and let's move all the numbers to the right-hand side. To accomplish that, we need to get rid of that positive 12, so we'll put a negative 12 on both sides of the equation. Combining the numbers, the positive 12 and negative 12 cancel one another, and we get 4x equals, on the right-hand side, positive 28 and negative 12 is positive 16. Steps 2 and 3 are complete. We now have the variable on one side and the number on the other. The fourth and final step is to remove the coefficient. So we'll divide both sides by 4, and that gives us x is equal to 4. Let's move on to equation B. Once again, we have a grouping symbol, so we'll begin with step 1. Step 1, remember, is to remove grouping symbols and combine like terms. I'm simply going to recopy the left-hand side of the equation, and then we'll begin by distributing the negative 2 into that parentheses. Negative 2 times positive 2a is negative 4a, and negative 2 times positive 5 is negative 10. With the grouping symbols gone, we can see that the right-hand side contains like terms, and those are the constant terms, or numbers. So let's combine those. We'll recopy once again what's on the left. Combining the numbers on the right, positive 7 and negative 10 is a negative 3, so we get negative 3 minus 4a. At this point, step 1 is complete. We got rid of grouping symbols and combined like terms. Let's move forward to steps 2 and 3. Variable on one side, number on the other. I prefer once again to have my variables on the left, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that negative 4a on the right, and to do so we'll put a positive 4a on both sides. Combining the variable terms, a negative 3a and a positive 4a is a positive 1a, or just a. On the right-hand side, the 4a's cancel and leave us with negative 3. Since we moved the variables to the left-hand side of the equation, we need to get all the numbers to the right-hand side. So we must remove the positive 4 on the left, and to do so, we'll put a negative 4 on both sides. Combining the numbers, the positive 4 and negative 4 cancel one another, and that leaves us a equals. On the right-hand side, negative 3 and negative 4 is negative 7. Step 4 is to remove the coefficient, but in this case the coefficient's a positive 1, and dividing by positive 1 won't change anything, so we're done. Alright, let's tackle problem C. Now in problem C we have grouping symbols inside of grouping symbols, which is sometimes referred to as nested grouping symbols. In this case we have to begin with the innermost grouping symbol first and eliminate the parentheses, and then move to the outermost grouping symbol, the brackets, and eliminate those second. In front of the parentheses I see no number that is visible, so I'm going to assume it's a 1, and because of the sign it's a negative 1, and we're going to distribute negative 1 to the parentheses. The 5, the bracket, and the 2 will not change. Negative 1 times positive 2x is negative 2x, and negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4. Let's move to the right-hand side of the equation, and we can eliminate those parentheses by distributing the positive 2. Positive 2 times 5 is positive 10, and positive 2 times negative 3x is negative 6x. Since we still have a grouping symbol on the left-hand side, the bracket, let's take this positive 5 that's in front of that bracket and distribute it into the bracket so that we can remove that grouping symbol. Positive 5 times 2 is positive 10. Positive 5 times negative 2x is negative 10x. Positive 5 times positive 4 is positive 20. And we'll recopy what's on the right-hand side. With all the grouping symbols on the left-hand side removed, we can combine like terms, and the left-hand side of the equation contains like terms, which are numbers or constant terms. Combining the numbers, a positive 10 and a positive 20 is a positive 30. At this point, step 1 is complete. We've removed all the grouping symbols and combined any like terms that were on the same side of the equation. So let's move on to steps 2 and 3. Let's get the variable on one side and the number on the other. To remove the negative 6x from the right-hand side of the equation, we'll put a positive 6x on both sides. Negative 10x and positive 6x is negative 4x, so we get negative 4x plus 30 equals, on the right-hand side we'll recopy the 10 and the 6x's cancel. Since we moved variables to the left, I need to move all the numbers to the right. And to accomplish that, we need to get rid of that positive 30. So we'll put a negative 30 on both sides. Combining the numbers, on the left the 30's cancel, and that gives us negative 4x equals negative 20. With the variable on one side and the number on the other, the fourth and final step is to remove the coefficient. And to do so, we'll divide both sides by negative 4, and we end up with x is equal to positive 5. Let's move on to equation D here, if we may. Much like the previous example, we see that we have grouping symbols and like terms, and brackets. So we'll begin with the innermost grouping symbol first, and we'll remove the parentheses by distributing the negative 3 that is in front of the parentheses. We'll recopy the 3 plus 2 and the bracket. Inside the bracket, the 4x won't change. And let's go ahead and distribute negative 3. Negative 3 times positive 5 is negative 15. Negative 3 times negative x is positive 3x. On the right-hand side, we can eliminate the grouping symbol by distributing positive 3. Positive 3 times x is positive 3x. Positive 3 times negative 20 is negative 60. Moving back to the left-hand side, we still have a grouping symbol which we need to eliminate, and that would be the bracket. And to eliminate that bracket, we must distribute the positive 2 to each of the 3 terms inside the bracket. Distributing positive 2 times 4x is positive 8x. Positive 2 times negative 15 is negative 30. Positive 2 times positive 3x is positive 6x. And we'll go ahead and recopy what's on the right-hand side of the equation. The grouping symbols are now all gone, but the left-hand side of the equation contains like terms which can be combined. Looking to the left-hand side of the equation, we have both numbers and variables which can be combined. Combining the numbers first, positive 3 and negative 30 is negative 27. Combining the variable terms, positive 8x and positive 6x is positive 14x. At this point, step 1 is complete. We've removed all grouping symbols and combined any like terms that were on the same side of the equation. We can move forward to steps 2 and 3. Let's collect the variables on one side and the numbers on the other. To get all the variables on the left-hand side, we need to remove that positive 3x on the right-hand side, and so to do so, we're going to put a negative 3x on both sides. Combining the x's, a positive 14 and a negative 3 is a positive 11, positive 11x. On the right-hand side, the 3x's cancel, and we're left with negative 60. Since we moved variables to the left, we have to get all the numbers on the right, and to accomplish that we need to get rid of the negative 27. To do so, we'll put a positive 27 on both sides. On the left-hand side, the 27's cancel, leaving us 11x equals. On the right-hand side, negative 60 and positive 27 is negative 33. Steps 2 and 3 are complete. We have the variable on one side, the number on the other. Fourth and final step is to remove the coefficient. So we'll divide both sides by positive 11, and we end up with x equals negative 3. Alright, so for the purposes of kind of outlining the four-step process, step 1 was get rid of grouping symbols, combine like terms. That occurred here. Step 2 was to get the variables on one side, the numbers on the other, steps 2 and 3. That happened here and here. And then step 4 was to remove the coefficient, which occurred here. Alright, the following examples are ones for you to try. You can try those yourself, and once again, check the document in Canvas under Modules to check your solutions, or if you'd like, you can proceed straight to WebAssign and tackle the homework.